The unexpected hero. The emergency klaxons aboard Starbase Centaurus weren't supposed to sound like old Earth fire trucks, but Zara Thorne had programmed them that way anyway. After 15 years as a firefighter in the Australian outback before joining the Galactic Emergency Response Team, she found the familiar wail comforting. It reminded her that no matter how far humanity had come, some things never changed. There would always be fires to fight and people to save. Emergency alert. Containment breach detected on Commercial Dock 7. Antimatter reactor instability detected aboard the Solar Princess. All non-essential personnel clear the area immediately. The AI's calm voice contrasted sharply with the urgent sirens. Zara was already moving, her augmented legs carrying her through the station's corridors at speeds that made her alien colleagues press against the walls. Her partner, Xith, a crystalline Andromian, flowed along beside her in liquid form, keeping pace. Thermal readings are exceeding safety parameters, Xith's melodious voice chimed. The princess's containment field is showing signs of imminent failure. Station chief has ordered full evacuation of the vessel. Casualties? Zara asked, her breath steady despite her sprint. The biomechanical enhancements in her lungs, standard issue for human emergency responders working in space, filtered the air efficiently. 273 passengers successfully evacuated. However, Xith hesitated, their crystalline form flickering with concern. One life sign remains in the nursery section. A Neptunian child. Zara's stride didn't break, but her jaw tightened. Neptunians were aquatic beings who required specialized environmental suits to survive in standard atmospheres. A child's suit wouldn't have the same resilience as an adult's. They reached Dock 7's observation deck, where Station Chief Foxtrix, a towering insectoid, was coordinating the evacuation. The viewing window showed the Solar Princess, a luxury liner known for its antimatter-powered artificial gravity systems that gave passengers the comfort of their native worlds. Now, those same systems were turning the ship into a potential catastrophe. The containment field is at 27% and failing. Voxtrix clicked rapidly. We've lost contact with the bridge crew. Automated systems are shutting down sequentially. Temperature in the nursery section has reached 700 Kelvin. Why hasn't anyone gone in after the child? Zara demanded, already checking her environmental suit seals. A deep voice responded from behind her. Because the last team that tried melted. Lieutenant Commander Rax, a Martian cyborg, stepped forward. His metallic features were set in a grave expression. The radiation levels are cooking electronics. 3 rescue bots went offline the moment they crossed the airlock. Zara did some quick mental math. 700 Kelvin was hot, around 427 degrees Celsius, but her suit was rated for brief exposure to temperatures twice that. The radiation was the bigger problem. It would fry any complex electronics, including the suit's cooling systems. How long does the kid have? She asked, already knowing she wouldn't like the answer. The Neptunian environmental pod is heavily shielded, Xith reported, but at current temperature increase rates, it will fail in approximately 17 minutes. Zara nodded, reaching for her helmet. That's 16 minutes longer than I need. Absolutely not. Voxtrix's mandibles clattered. The risk is unacceptable. We've already lost too many. With all due respect, Chief, Zara interrupted, humans have something your other rescue teams don't. She grinned, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. We're too stupid to know when to quit. Before anyone could stop her, she grabbed her emergency kit. Old school, no electronics to fry, and headed for the airlock. Xith flowed after her, their crystalline form rippling with anxiety. Zara, the probability of survival. Never tell me the odds, partner. She sealed her helmet. Just be ready with the emergency medical pod when I get back. When? Xith's tone was skeptical. Always when, never if. Zara checked her oxygen gauge. Analog, thankfully, and stepped into the airlock. Besides, I promised my sister I'd call her tonight. Can't very well do that if I'm vapor, can I? The airlock cycled, and Zara stepped into hell. The corridor before her was warped, the metal walls softening like butter in a pan. The emergency lights cast everything in a hellish red glow, broken occasionally by sparks from failing systems. She had 17 minutes to cross half a kilometer of increasingly unstable ship, reach a nursery designed to keep water-breathing aliens comfortable, and somehow get back with a child whose environmental needs were completely opposite to her own. Just another Tuesday in space. The message was clear enough. The ship was about to tear itself apart. Zara broke into a run, no longer bothering to test her footing. The nursery had to be close. Each step left molten footprints behind her, the soles of her boots gradually being eaten away by the incredible heat. The air around her was shimmering so intensely it was like running through a mirage. Finally, she saw it, the reinforced doors of the nursery section, designed to protect its vulnerable occupants from any emergency. Under normal circumstances, these doors would be an impassable barrier, their complex electronic locks and backup systems making them virtually impenetrable. But circumstances had stopped being normal the moment the containment field started failing. The doors, like everything else, had been warped by the heat. Through a gap in their buckling seams, Zara could see something glowing blue, the emergency lights of a Neptunian environmental pod. "Hold on, kid," she said, readying her axe. "The cavalry's about to make one hell of an entrance." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. Somewhere far below, something exploded. Zara set her feet, raised the axe, and prepared to demonstrate why humans had survived every catastrophe their homeworld had thrown at them. Sometimes, the direct approach was the only approach left. The heart of the storm. The first swing of Zara's axe sent sparks cascading across the warped nursery doors. The second created a crack. By the fifth, she had carved a hole large enough to see through, and what she saw made her heart skip a beat. The nursery itself was a nightmare of twisted metal and melted plastic, but in the center, surrounded by a faint blue glow, sat a Neptunian environmental pod. Inside, a small figure floated in the pressurized liquid atmosphere. A child no more than 6 Earth years old by appearance, their aquamarine scales glinting in the emergency lights. "Hey there," Zara called out, her voice carrying through the pod's external sensors. "I'm Zara. I'm here to get you out." The child's large, luminescent eyes blinked. When they spoke, their voice was translated through the pod's systems, still somehow functioning. "I'm Naya. The pod says it's dying. Are you dying too?" Zara managed to smile, though sweat was pouring down her face inside her helmet. "Not today, kiddo. But we should probably get moving before this ship decides to redecorate any further." She widened the hole in the door, each strike of the axe more difficult as the heat continued to rise. Her suit's temperature regulation was failing. She could feel the burn through her protective layers now, like standing too close to a bonfire while wearing wet clothes. Finally, the opening was large enough. Zara squeezed through, her suit scraping against the hot metal. The nursery's environmental controls had long since failed, turning the room into something approaching the surface of Venus. The Neptunian pod was a marvel of engineering, a self-contained environment designed to keep aquatic beings alive in space. Under normal circumstances, it could maintain itself for weeks. But these weren't normal circumstances, and the pod's external shell was beginning to show signs of stress. "Your pod's mobile, right?" Zara asked, examining the base unit. "Yes, but..." Naya's translated voice wavered. "The motors stopped working." The nice computer voice said something about thermal cascade failure before it went quiet. Zara checked the pod's status display. The internal environment was still stable, but the outer shell was approaching critical temperatures. The automated systems had shut down to preserve power for life support. Another violent shudder ran through the ship. Through her boots, Zara could feel the deck plates beginning to buckle. "Okay, change of plans." She reached for her kit again, pulling out what looked like a collection of straps and handles. "We're going old school." The rescue harness was designed for exactly this kind of situation. When technology failed, muscle power had to take over. Zara quickly attached the straps around the pod, creating anchor points. "Naya, I need you to stay very still," she instructed, securing the last strap. "Think of it like being in a current. Just flow with it." "Are we going to die?" Naya asked, their large eyes fixed on Zara. "Not on my watch." Zara finished the rigging and grabbed the main handles. My sister would never let me hear the end of it if I died on a simple rescue mission. Besides, I've got tickets to the Zero-G cricket finals next week. The ship groaned again, and this time the sound was accompanied by a series of sharp cracks as structural supports began to fail. Status report. Zara shouted into her radio, hoping something would get through. Static answered her, then Xith's voice, barely audible. Containment. Critical. Minutes. Get out? Zara took a deep breath, ignoring the way her lungs burned with each inhalation. The path back would be worse than the journey in. The ship was degrading faster than expected, and now she had precious cargo to protect. Ready for a ride, Naya? She gripped the handles firmly, testing the weight. The pod was heavy, but in the ship's failing artificial gravity, manageable. Let's show these aliens how humans handle a crisis. Another explosion rocked the ship, closer this time. Through the twisted doorway, Zara could see the corridor beginning to collapse. Hold tight, kid. She tensed, ready to move. We're about to make history, first human sled pull in space. Though between you and me, she added with a grin, I really hope we don't set any speed records. I've got enough medals already. With that, she threw her weight against the harness and began to pull, dragging the pod toward the exit. Each step was a battle against failing gravity, melting floors, and the ever-present heat that was now hot enough to make the air shimmer like a mirage. The timer in her head kept counting down, matching the rhythm of her steps. They had minutes, maybe less, before the containment field failed completely. After that, the antimatter reactor would destabilize, and the entire ship would become a very brief, very bright reminder of why proper maintenance schedules were important. But Zara wasn't thinking about that. She was thinking about the next step, the next breath, the next few meters of corridor. Sometimes, survival wasn't about the big picture. It was about breaking the impossible down into manageable pieces. One step at a time. One breath at a time. One life at a time. The mantra that had carried her through burning buildings on Earth now carried her through the heart of a dying starship, pulling hope behind her in a glowing blue pod. Against all odds, the journey back was a descent through progressive levels of hell. Each deck they passed was worse than the last, the ship literally melting around them. Zara's boots had almost completely disintegrated, leaving her to walk on the emergency backup soles, simple ceramic plates that offered minimal protection but wouldn't melt. Are all humans this crazy? Naya's voice came through the pod's speakers, somehow still functioning despite the overwhelming radiation. Nah, Zara grunted, dragging the pod around a corner where the floor had begun to ripple like waves. Some of us are completely sensible. We don't let them off Earth, though. They'd ruin our reputation. A section of ceiling collapsed behind them, sending a wave of molten metal splashing down the corridor. Zara picked up the pace, her muscles screaming in protest. The environmental pod was designed to be mobile, not dragged through a disintegrating spaceship by a half-cooked human. 3 minutes to total containment failure. Automated voice echoed through the ship's few remaining speakers. Please accept our compliments for choosing Solar Princess Cruises for your final voyage. Your ship's computer is very polite, Naya observed. Yeah, nothing like good manners while everything's exploding. Zara checked her oxygen gauge, quarter tank left. More than enough, assuming they didn't get trapped, crushed, melted, or atomized in the next few minutes. They reached the maintenance shaft she'd used to climb up. Looking down, she could see that most of the ladder had melted away, leaving a smooth, glowing tube of superheated metal. Right, Zara muttered. Time for Plan B. What's Plan B? Something incredibly stupid that will probably get me fired if we survive. She began unfastening some of the pod straps, reconfiguring them. How's your pod's structural integrity? The nice computer lady says it's at 60% and dropping, Naya reported. She also says we're all going to die, but she's been saying that for a while now. Smart lady. Zara finished her modifications to the harness. Okay, kid, here's the plan. We're going to treat this maintenance shaft like a water slide, except instead of water, it's superheated metal, and instead of fun, it's terrifying. The ship shuddered violently, and somewhere below, something exploded with enough force to make the entire shaft vibrate. 2 minutes to containment failure, the ship announced cheerfully. Would you like to hear today's dinner menu while you wait? Zara positioned the pod at the shaft's entrance. She'd modified the harness to act as a brake system, using the shaft's walls to control their descent. In theory, it would work like rappelling down a cliff face. In practice, well, she'd find out soon enough. Ready for the ride of your life, Naya? I don't know what that means, but the pod says my survival chances are higher with you than staying here. That's the spirit. Zara took a deep breath, ignoring the way her suit was now hot enough to feel like it was cooking her alive. On 3, 1. Another explosion rocked the ship. 3. She pushed off, launching them into the shaft. The descent was pure chaos. Sparks flew as the harness scraped against the walls, the friction adding even more heat to the already superheated environment. Zara's arms felt like they were being torn from their sockets as she fought to control their speed. They passed the 5th deck in a blur of molten metal and emergency lights. 4th deck, another explosion somewhere above them. 3rd deck, the shaft began to twist, forcing Zara to adjust their trajectory mid-fall. 2nd deck, something in her suit gave way with a hiss, and suddenly breathing became much more difficult. 1st deck, they hit a partially collapsed section, bouncing off one wall and nearly losing control. Finally, they reached the bottom, shooting out of the shaft like a cork from a bottle. Zara's legs gave out as they hit the deck, but she managed to keep the pod upright. Containment field failure imminent, the ship announced. Thank you for choosing Solar Princess Cruises. Please remember to rate your experience on our satisfaction survey. The dock was just ahead, but the corridor leading to it had become a tunnel of flowing metal and explosive decompression. Beyond it, through waves of heat distortion, Zara could see the airlock, their last hope for survival. Her suit was failing, her oxygen was running low, and every breath felt like inhaling fire. But none of that mattered. All that mattered was the next few meters, the final sprint between life and death. Hey, Naya. She gripped the harness tighter, gathering her remaining strength. Yes? Want to help me set a new human speed record? The pod's lights pulsed once, almost like a laugh. The computer says that would be extremely dangerous and likely fatal. Perfect. Zara grinned despite the pain, despite the heat, despite everything. That's exactly how we like it. With that, she threw herself forward, charging through hell itself with precious cargo in tow, proving once again why humans had become legendary among the stars. Not for their technology or their wisdom, but for their absolute refusal to accept impossible odds. Legacy of courage. The final sprint through the collapsing corridor felt like running through the heart of a star. With each step, Zara's world narrowed to 3 things: the airlock ahead, the pod behind her, and the steady countdown in her head. 30 seconds to containment failure. Warning, the ship's AI announced with inappropriate cheer. Antimatter containment critical. Would anyone like to hear a fun fact about particle physics? 20 seconds. The airlock was visible now through the heat distortion, its reinforced frame still holding despite everything. Beyond it, Zara could see movement, emergency teams preparing for their arrival. 10 seconds. Incoming. Zara's voice was barely a whisper, her throat raw from the superheated air leaking into her failing suit. But she didn't need to shout. Xith was already there, their crystalline form flowing through the airlock's emergency protocols. 5 seconds. With one final surge of strength, Zara hurled herself and the pod through the airlock. She felt Xith's cool embrace as her partner's liquid form surrounded them, creating a protective barrier. The airlock slammed shut. Behind them, the Solar Princess's containment field finally failed. The ship didn't explode. It simply ceased to exist, antimatter and matter annihilating each other in a flash of pure energy that briefly outshone the station's sun. The emergency team swarmed around them. Someone was cutting away Zara's half-melted suit. Someone else was connecting Naya's pod to station power. Medical sensors beeped urgently. Vital signs critical, a medic announced. Severe dehydration, second-degree burns, radiation exposure. Did we set a record? Zara managed to ask before consciousness began to fade. You broke 17 station safety protocols, Xith replied, their crystalline form still wrapped protectively around her. 8 of which didn't exist until you violated them. So that's a yes? She tried to smile, but her face wouldn't quite cooperate. That's a yes, Sith confirmed. Now please stop talking and let the medical team work. The last thing Zara heard before passing out was Naya's voice through the pod speakers. Are all humans this strange? No, Sith replied. Some are much worse. 3 weeks later, Zara stood before the Galactic Emergency Response Board, trying not to fidget in her dress uniform. Her skin was still pink from regenerative treatment, but she was alive, which, according to the medical team, was something of a miracle. Let me see if I understand this correctly, Board Chairman Vexthor said, their mandibles clicking in what might have been exasperation. When faced with a situation that your own systems classified as impossible survival scenario, you chose to ignore the classification? With respect, sir, Zara replied, humans have a different definition of impossible. Yes, we're beginning to understand that. The chairman gestured to a holographic display showing the remains of the Solar Princess. Your actions violated nearly every safety protocol we have. But they worked, Zara pointed out. They worked, the chairman agreed. And therein lies our dilemma. How do we address actions that are simultaneously completely unacceptable and undeniably successful? If I may suggest, Sith chimed in from their position beside Zara, perhaps we need to reconsider our definitions of acceptable when humans are involved. The board chambers erupted in a cacophony of alien voices, each species adding their own perspective to the debate. Zara stood quietly, trying not to smile as the galactic bureaucracy attempted to cope with human unpredictability. Finally, the chairman raised all 4 hands for silence. Commander Thorne, in light of your unique approach to emergency response, the board has decided to create a new division. The Unconventional Solutions Unit will handle situations that defy standard protocols. You're putting me in charge of breaking rules, sir? We're putting you in charge of teaching others when and how to break them correctly. The chairman's mandibles twitched. The galaxy is changing, Commander. Perhaps it's time our procedures changed with it. As Zara left the chamber, she found Naya waiting outside, their pod hovering at perfect human eye level. The elders say I can join emergency response training when I'm older, the young Neptunian announced. I want to learn to be crazy like humans. Kid, Zara laughed. Being human isn't about being crazy. It's about looking at the impossible and saying, watch me. She patted the pod's shell. But if you want to learn, I know a pretty good teacher. Above them, through the station's vast observation windows, the stars continued their eternal dance, unaware that the galaxy's definition of impossible had just shifted ever so slightly. Sometimes that's all it takes. One person, one moment, one decision to try anyway, even when every logical analysis says you can't. Humans had built their entire civilization on such moments. And now, thanks to one firefighter who refused to accept impossible odds, the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand why.